be in Romans chapter 12. Romans 12, and we're just going to read verses 1 and 2. So Romans 12, 1 and 2. And kind of continuing along on when I do Sunday nights, kind of the theme that I've been going with is a disciple. What does it look like? What does a Christ follower look like? So tonight we're going to be talking about a disciple has a desire to worship God. So a disciple has a desire to worship God. So as Christ followers, disciples, another term for it, worshiping God is not limited to just singing, right? It is not limited to just service here at church. It's not limited to just Sunday morning. It's not limited to just Sunday night or Wednesday night. See, worship is a lifestyle. As a disciple, worship should be a lifestyle. So before we read anything, let's define what worship is. So according to Google, if you look up the definition of worship, worship is an expression of reverence and adoration. So an expression of reverence and adoration. And if you look up, I looked up both those big words there too, reverence and adoration. So reverence is a deep respect, and adoration is deep love. So basically, you can define worship as an expression of deep respect and deep love. That's the definition of worship. So let's read our scripture. Romans 12, 1 and 2. It says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So the question becomes, how can you have a lifestyle of worship? How can you show deep respect, deep love, praise and worship God through your everyday life? Because, face it, a lifestyle of love, a lifestyle of worship has to be every single day. Otherwise, it's not a lifestyle, right? It's more of a hobby. Any of y'all got any hobbies? You do them when you can. You kind of do it when you get the opportunity. But a lifestyle is every single day, right? So you can't just come to church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. That's more of a hobby. That's something we get to enjoy to do. Don't get me wrong, it's a great opportunity to worship God. But it shouldn't be the only opportunity that we take to worship God. Our entire life should be one great big worship service. We should be showing deep respect, deep love to God every single hour, every single minute of our lives. People should be able to look at us and go, they have using the big words, a reverence and an adoration for God. So, one misconception among many Christians is that congregational worship that happens on Sunday is all that is needed. See, many people believe that that's plenty enough worship, right? I think there's somewhere, if you do the math, I think there's about 168 hours in a week, something like that. And you attend a church for 2 to 4 hours, something don't add up. You're giving God 2 or 4 hours of worship, and what are you doing with the other 160 even? To me, I think my God deserves a little more than 2 or 4 hours out of those 160 something hours. He deserves every minute that I'm awake. Amen. Because He's provided me the breath to wake up. He's provided me the energy, the strength to move, to walk. My life should be an expression of that adoration that He's allowed me to live another day. So, but worship is much bigger than just Sunday mornings. It's much bigger than just Sunday nights or Wednesday nights. Our day-to-day acts of obedience, compassion, and mercy, and so much more, provide opportunities to glorify God. See, it's through our obedience. It's through acts of mercy towards other people. It's through compassion, showing compassion unto others. That's how you worship God. Now, if you are seeking to live a life of a Christ follower, then this is an essential concept to grasp, that it's every single day. It is much more than just singing songs. Now don't get me wrong. I love singing songs. I love to hear people sing songs of praise. And it is a great way to show worship to God. But how many people in church is the only time that you're singing those songs? How about out in the world where other people can hear them? Because not too often, I mean, don't get me wrong, it happens. Non-believers, non-Christ followers come in this church house. But the majority of them are not inside these walls. The majority of them don't see you worshiping God. So, what makes worship special inside the church? Just a question to throw out there. What makes worship special inside the church? It's not the building. This building does not make it special. These comfy chairs and pews and that great big choir, that doesn't make it special. What makes it special is the presence of God. That's the only thing that can make worship inside this building special. If the presence of God is not inside this building, it's not special worship. Nothing makes it special inside here. Now, what are the different things needed for worship to occur within the sanctuary? What are the different things needed for worship to occur within inside the sanctuary? I'll have you know it's not that piano. It's not that bass. It's not that guitar. It's not Brother William standing up there singing the wilderness and songs. What is required is a holy God, a humble Christian with an attitude of worship. A holy God, a humble Christian with an attitude of worship. That is what's required. In Romans 12:1, let's reread that one again. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Now, Paul uses the term living sacrifice. Living sacrifice. So what is a sacrifice? If you look up what is a sacrifice, it is something offered up, destroyed, or put in place of something else. So something offered up, destroyed, put in place of something else. Now, a sacrifice had to be without blemish, right? When they offered sacrifices back in that time, it had to be without blemish. And Paul says that we should offer ourselves as a living sacrifice. So we must turn our whole lives over to God completely. That's what it meant to offer a sacrifice. You had to just give it up. Whatever it was, you couldn't keep part of it for yourself. You had to give the whole thing, right? So we got to give our whole lives completely and strive to be excellent in the eyes of God. We should strive to be without blemish. But only doing so out of deep respect and love. See, too many people, I think, that's why religion, I think, gets such a bad name. Because a lot of people only go and only do out of fear of the consequences. A lot of people only do certain things because they fear the outcome of it. See, as Christians, as a disciple, as a Christ follower, we shouldn't do nothing out of fear. It should be out of reverence, out of deep respect, out of deep love that we do anything. That should be why. See, because He died for me, because He bore my sins, because I couldn't be perfect, that's why I do anything that I do. It should be, as Christians. So what makes the pursuit of being holy and acceptable an act of worship? What makes the pursuit of being holy, as the Scripture said, and acceptable an act of worship? See, God is by nature against sin. Right? By nature, He is against sin. Therefore, when we choose to live according to the will of God and avoid sin, we are honoring and loving God. Simply by being obedient. Right? God hates sin. When we choose not to sin, it's obedience. Obedience is worship. Because in doing that, we're honoring God. Romans 12:2. Reread that one. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Now, in most cases, it is not a lack of desire to please God. for most people, but rather our sinful nature. See, nobody really just chooses, I just want to be disrespectful to God. I just want to sin. Most Christians don't choose that. They actually have a desire to please God, but it's the sinful nature. See, it comes from being surrounded by the world. You know, there's so much opportunity, so many things going in our eyes, in our ears, that it's almost impossible because we are being conformed by the world around. See, conforming to the things we allow to enter our minds. See, that scripture says renewing your mind. So anything in our mind, most of the time we've either seen it or heard it. And that, in turn, affects us. See, I got a little bit of an illustration here. Think about it like this. Think of this cup as the world. Think of the ice as me and you. Okay? If left in this world long enough, you can already see, I didn't put no water in here to begin with, right? What's happening?
It's melting.
It's melting, right? So, right now it has its own shape that is separated from this world, from this cup. But eventually, if left in there long enough, it'll melt. And it'll look like this, right? What's inside look like ice anymore? No, right? It's taken the shape of the cup. See, we are like that. When left in the world and left there long enough, we will conform to the world if we don't change something. See, Paul is not saying that we should lock ourselves inside and avoid the world. This is not what Jesus did, right? Jesus didn't just lock himself in a room and not go out into the world, not interact with the world. See, but rather, he is saying to influence the world, but not be influenced by it. See, we should be in the world, but we should be influencing the world. The world should not be influencing us. See, let's look at it this way. When you got a regular cup, what's the temperature of the cup? Room temperature, right? Whatever it is, whatever the surrounding thing is. What would y'all reckon the temperature of this cup is? It's kind of cold now, right?
Temperature of the ice.
Yeah. So it's being affected by the ice that's inside of it, right? Now, if I were to take this ice, stick it in here for a little bit, take the ice out and put it back in the freezer, would it maintain its ice shape? Just leave it in here long enough to cool the cup a little bit, take it back and put it back in the freezer. It maintains its shape. How long will the cup stay cold? For a little bit, right? Then I take the ice back out and I put it back in the cup. But before it melts, I take it back out and I put it back in the freezer. See, I maintain keeping the cup cold, but I also maintain the shape of the ice. See, we as Christians need to be that exact same way. See, think of the freezer as God. And think about us going out into the world, affecting the world. Okay? But never long enough, never staying long enough for it to affect us before getting powered back up and then go back out into the world again. As church. Okay? That's what it's like to come to church. That's what it's like to be around other believers. That's what it's like when you have a lifestyle of worship. Okay? You're never in the world letting the world affect you, but you're in the world affecting it, changing it. But it's all about our lives. It's all about what direction we choose. Now, and it says, let's read that one more time. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. See, I just want to point out something about the will of God. The will of God, it says, is good. The will of God, it says, is acceptable. And the will of God is perfect. And now, that doesn't just apply to my life. That doesn't just apply to Brother Jason's life, Brother Dean's life, right? That applies to all our lives as Christ followers. His will is perfect, it's good, it's acceptable. Why do we try to live outside of that will? Why do we want to live our own lives apart from that path? See, as ice is designed to cool. Okay? Now, eventually it reaches the point where it no longer cools anymore. It's no longer serving the purpose, right? We want ice to make things cold. That's what this is designed to do. Any of y'all ever had got ice, cup full of ice, put some Coke in it, walked off, forgot about it, didn't drink it, and you come back? What happened to that Coke? Watered down and ain't no good no more, right? It was good when it was cold. It was good when the ice was serving its purpose. But once it stopped serving its purpose, it actually made the world worse. To me, that's what happens when you have a Christian who is no longer inside the will of God. See, he's actually affecting the world in a worse place. Because when the lost and dying world looks at them and they go, well, that's a Christian? That's how they live? I'm better than they are. What do I need to go to that church house for? See, the world is actually worse when we're outside, as Christians, we're outside the will of God. Because it makes so much harder, right? Because how you got a drink that's watered down. When you put more ice in it, it makes it cold. It makes it a little bit better, right? But it's kind of already a little ruined, right? That's what, when we as Christians live outside the will of God, that's what it's like. See, we need to remain in the fruits. We need to remain in the will of God. We need to be empowered by God. And that's my short lesson for tonight. Because like I said, I anticipated a business meeting. A business meeting.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
We'll stand, and if anybody don't have anything else, Brother Clarence, would you mind dismissing us for the night?
Father God, I want to